Good day, folks. This is Matthew Brown here, finding one for our son at Madison 365. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Stitcher. Hit subscribe and all that fun jazz. Share, you know the deal. Thanks for coming, folks. We are wrapping up January 2021 here. This is recorded on really kind of last weekend. And things are uncertain. Ooh. It's interesting. It feels like that things have calmed down. They haven't. We're in what I would say is kind of a lull. It seems like, and I should say this cast is going to be much more reflective on the last kind of where we are politically, the dangers of the current white nationalist movements and subsections of it, and so on and so forth. How it's really is the base of the GOP, and what we can look for going forward, not look for, but what it might look like. Some of it we can be found during the Reconstruction era, post-Civil War era Reconstruction, post-Reconstruction, early Jim Crow. But we're really at just the beginning, and we're already seeing what could be dubbed a lost cause myth, or a new one of the lost cause, and this is the lost election or lost re-election of Donald Trump, which is looked upon as illegitimate or stolen. Now, there's a variety of ways to look at this. There are, some that fully believe that, there is this vast conspiracy that somehow there are fraudulent votes in these elections, even though that it cast for Biden or against Trump, that somehow in these same states, Republican senators and House congressional reps didn't vote for. It's, again, really weird. So there's, some of these true conspiracy believers, but there's still... what really feeds that is still the white nationalism, it's still the racism in those folks, insofar as they can't believe, particularly in their world, that there are, one, so many people that would vote for Biden, and two, it's particularly this black and brown vote. It has always been looked upon as illegitimate in this country, in various forms. And that's part of it. Is, of course, those votes aren't legitimate. Be it that, folks just don't want black and brown people to vote, or the air we breathe, white supremacy. The folks that are so deep in it, they can't even imagine themselves as white supremacists or white nationalists. They had to lie to themselves about it. We kind of had two brands. The ones that, three. We have ones that will admit it privately, but not publicly because they're smart. In a weird way. We have those that will admit it privately and publicly, and then we have folks that are just outright denial yet support the exact same things those folks support. But it kind of doesn't matter, really. When we get down to combating it, sometimes it does matter, but it doesn't. So in some context, sorry, I know I'm going against myself, but these things are complicated. It's rocket science, but they're fully enabled by the GOP. These folks aren't being ostracized from the party. They're being embraced. We can see this particularly at the state political level, where we have state political parties doubling down on making things harder for black and brown people to vote, where you have places like Arizona where they're looking to pass a law that the state legislature can overturn the electorates in the popular vote. There is actually some debate about the constitutionality of it in some forms. That's an interesting topic, and people much more in depth about the Constitution will weigh in that eventually. But the biggest thing that lays down is that within the creation of each state is supposed to, each legislature can decide how it, counts electorates and so on and so forth. But one of the underlying aspects of it is that it has to be within a Republican form of government, small r, not the Republican Party, which means that they still have to have it in such a way that upholds people's votes. At least, that's the counter argument, it seems like, to it. But they're fully embraced. These congressional reps that increasing evidence shows that they coordinated with those that invaded the Capitol and were looking to execute people. Growing evidence of this. And not just that, there's a whole host of evidence of their conspiracy theory views, their anti-Semitic views. One believes that George Soros has a space laser that helped set off the 2018 California fires. Yes, you heard that right. Yet they're still in office. And some folks have tepid rejection, saying, these are, of course, they won't expel them from Congress. Anybody that has any Republicans that have any criticism of it aren't saying remove them. They're still choosing party over country. But these forces have always been here. It's the same thing that led to the overthrow of Reconstruction. Again, that lost cause myth that they were, the Civil War, somehow they were betrayed or, just down the line. Well, yeah, betrayed. They felt betrayed by Northern whites. And then Northern whites betrayed Black Americans by aligning with Southern whites on a path of forgiveness and unity. It was unity with Southern whites. Where then Northern whites, and I'm not really getting deep into political parties because there's really much more, your party was more defined by geography. And there weren't that many ideological differences between the parties per se, particularly at the dawn of the 20th century and into the early 21st century. That changed with progressive politics within FDR, but there were progressive factions within both parties. There were liberal factions, there were conservative factions, and far-right factions within both parties. And you had, and particularly, out west, you had Western Republicans aligning with Southern Democrats at times, and vice versa. It all kind of depended upon the issue. But one of the main core underlying aspects of it is that they turn, no matter where, you either turn a blind eye, you became complicit, or you took part in developing and pushing racial oppression in this country at various levels, be it government agencies, government agents, or non-government agents, like the Ku Klux Klan, right? But they weren't the only thing. You had places like the White League, White Citizens Council, and other organizations that maintained the racial status quo and down the line. And they used various forms of this through violent intimidation. And politicians and white politicians effectively decided to, hey, we'll stop combating each other, but have your way with the Negroes. And that's what happened. Civil rights movement. It wasn't peaceful. There's a lot of violent pushback, both by government and non-governmental actors. A lot. There's a lot of bombings and killings through the 50s and 60s and even into the 70s. And largely what saw these things decline was the rise of the carceral state and the drug war, the prison industrial complex, and the turn to police to assert themselves as those maintaining the color line. Police always took part in it, but this was a full-on assertion of it as the violence is chaotic. And there really was no difference. A lot of Klan members and White Citizen Leagues folks were also police members and judges. And these folks are teachers, bankers. They're not outcasts in society. And the same folks that were yelling at people integrating, they grew up, they had their kids. These were the folks in middle and high school, these kids that were yelling and bullying these Black kids integrating white schools as Black teachers were fired. They raised their kids. What happened to their kids? These are those kids that we're seeing. And their kids. This is who they are. This is what this country is and has been. With the civil rights movement, you had some victories, but overall, there was a massive backlash two victories in the civil rights movement that manifested in various different ways. One of those was the rise of our carceral system and deindustrialization and the rejection of the New Deal and the rise of trickle-down economics and down the line, things that hurt black people more than white people. The conspiracy aspects of it were always, the Bertram, I think I'm pronouncing that right, movement was part of this conspiratorial kind of underground movement in conservatism for a long time, and just spouted out of that. You saw that as well, these kind of conspiracy-minded stuff within evangelicals, and there was a great marriage between those folks, particularly under Reagan, who was very freaking racist, and we know this. He was, as very racist. This is who they are. So our path forward can be seen really through the eyes, even though it failed, of Reconstruction. And there are aspects of Reconstruction that we need to look towards. And it was the forcible enforcement of, a little redundant, forcible enforcement of a multicultural democracy. The passage of laws, constitutional amendments, the use of federal agencies and the law and subpoenas and, legal enforcement arms of the federal branch to enforce these laws, to protect people from the violence others wanted to accost upon them. And, well, it worked. It worked. Or it was working. They could have been more forceful with it, but they didn't have the stomach to see it through. The stomach to see it through can actually look at what happened, and even then, it did fall short in various ways, was what happened within Germany post-World War II. You hung the big leaders. You made it shameful to be a Nazi. The denazification of Germany was big. They forcefully implemented policies. They the forcefulness of enforcement, and they had a truth and reconciliation aspect with it through all of non-Soviet Russia. Soviet Germany, communist Germany, whatever. Woo. It fell short insofar that the United States government wanted to bring in, and thinking the CIA, Operation Paperclip, and neo-fascists in Greece, and an embrace of far-right ideologies to combat communism. And, that's where it fell short. Where it fell short, again, was in America's fascist leanings, not Germany's, America's fascist leanings. And they let the fascists and the Nazis off light, the leaders then, to combat communism. In order to combat the Soviet Union, you can say it was communism, but it's really just seen as the only other great power threat. If there's another power, another ideology besides socialism and communism that was a great power threat to the United States would oppose it then. It's just a lust for power. Because let's be real, we still have breadlines, and there's all sorts of stuff wrong with it, with capitalism. So we have to look at Reconstruction now and look towards, post-Nazi Germany, like these types of things that are forcible, aren't tepid, but are strong and forceful. You're looking at an investigation and kicking out of white nationalists, of police, beyond just the massive reforms of these institutions that need to happen as well. These things have to be done at the local level all the way on up. The step of removing fascist symbols such as the thin blue line flag from UWPD, that's a good first step. Next first step would be investigating and kicking out white nationalists. After that, you're looking at actively taking part in a full reimagining of this, how to enforce a social contract here in the United States. And police actually have a lot of leeway. They're a governmental agency that, at minimum, has to abide by the Constitution of the United States. They have a lot of leeway to do a lot of different things. And of course, state and local charters, but, the city is in charge of local charters and can do a lot to give the police even more leeway and legal backing to kick out these folks and to change how they operate in enforcing the social contract. They don't have to push back on these things. But it's going to be hard. Again, this is the beginning. Every single choice we make now will decide whether it's 4, 10, 15, and 20 years from now what will happen. This country's at a crossroads. If we don't fully embrace a multicultural democracy, this might be our last chance. This really might be our last chance. I don't know, but it's a high likelihood, a high probability that this is our last chance. As a nation, as a country, of what we are. And it's going to be hard because this isn't like a clear line like that divides the North and South. It's just scattered all across the country. And that's scary. Because we're going to be facing a real insurgency of folks using violence and intimidation to take control of local, state, and federal government in this country, to enforce the color line. I mean, that's what it's about. When they talk unity, it's about white unity. That's what they want. It's a white nationalist movement. They're asking white folks to join them to help assert that. So what we're seeing now is a lull of what, in essence, was an opening salvo of their civil war. And they've been at war ideologically for a while. They've said they've been at war. And these folks are at war with the United States and with the very idea of a multicultural government, multicultural democracy. We have to trust what they say. And this is scary. There's so many unknowns. A lot's going to be dependent upon what Biden does, but a lot's also going to be dependent upon what we do locally and statewide. Do we take these people at their word and combat them as such and treat them like they're at war with us? Because that changes how we engage with them. It's not to say don't reject trying to pull people over, but Democrats have to govern with power and wield power. We have, and we can't back down from the notion of multicultural democracy. If you're white and self-identify as liberal and get uncomfortable around certain things like defund the police, you know what? You need to check yourself and back off. Quite honestly, back off and actually support those things. Because the police have been nothing but agents of white supremacy in this country, enforcing the color line. We have white nationalists throughout their ranks across the country. Police unions openly embracing white nationalism, Trumpism, Q, conspiracy theories, and down the line. Tepidly supporting the insurrectionists during the coup attempt on January 6th. The only way forward for those that believe there are good cops, those good cops need to adamantly reject the white supremacist history of police. And the only way you can do that is to actively take part in the defunding and reallocation of resources and the complete reimagining of what public safety looks like in this country, of what things are legal, what isn't illegal, of jail abolition, because these things are rooted in the enforcement of this color line. How is this government at any level going to target white nationalists wanting to enforce white supremacy in this country and reject a multicultural democracy, going to combat that when these same institutions are rooted in the very same thing that they're trying to combat? You can't do that. It doesn't work like that. You're going to fall short every time. You can try and you'll get some victories, absolutely, but you're going to fall short every time. So we need to reevaluate what these are and deconstruct them and rebuild them into something that is rooted in a multicultural democracy. All our institutions, they're like that. Some can be, remodeled or reformed. I think something like social work can be like that. Well, other aspects like police and our justice system need completely redone from the ground up. And so you have to figure out where those spots are. Make yourself get more and more uncomfortable. Because as long as you accept some forms of white supremacy and white nationalism in this country and don't actively combat them at all points, we will have these forces, and these forces might be temporarily defeated at times, but they will grow. There'll be backlash. There'll be more and more and more. And then we are right back where we are, facing a very real national crisis, a broken nation and a broken people. And we are. We are a failed state right now. So push Democrats that might not be in favor of filibuster reform to do it. All right? Make those calls. Combat local representatives that refuse to defund the police and invest in things like public housing. Austin just did this, right? Part of their capital budget, the city bought a hotel to house homeless folks, and part of the money that they defunded from their police department, they then transferred over to be part of that operational budget. And guess what? It's cheaper to house them and provide services than it is to perpetually police homeless folk. I know people get weird and scared about, one, having homeless people live safely near them, and then two, giving people this something they, quote unquote, didn't work for. Guess what, though? It benefits everybody. And the fact is, if you don't want to house those that are less fortunate than you, you are not a good person. You're not. You're just not a good person. I don't care how else you treat other people individually, but if you're against policies that actively uplift people and support people that are less fortunate than you, or maybe you did struggle and you didn't receive the help back then, so you want to punish them because you didn't get help when you were struggling? Come on now. Don't be like that. You benefit from so many things that other people, didn't have. All right? So many different things here across the world that we have that other people didn't benefit from. So you're going to reject those things too? Because that's what that is. So we have to fully, at every level, embrace a multicultural democracy. At every level. That's our only way through this. Local governments need to launch truth and reconciliation commissions, fully look at how they can change how they operate at every level. State governments do the same thing. Anybody that's about this. I don't know if there's enough elected Democrats that are willing to do that, but it's on us to push them. It's on us to call for it. So let's do this. Find how you can help support a multicultural democracy and do it. Find your way. Because we all got different ways. Not everybody can beat the street. I can't beat the street for my health, right? Plus, it's really cold right now, too. That's what it is. And that's what it's going to take. Because, these forces have to be met overwhelmingly by those on the side of good, right? It can't be tepid. It can't be tepid to even to the point where they look like they're going to fall down. It has to be overwhelming. It has to be overwhelming. And it's scary. It is really scary. This is a scary time we're in so many ways. But our choices now will decide our fate for 10 or 15 or 20 years from now. We don't know when we're going to meet that inflection point, the critical point, the critical mass of it all. Because we haven't come to a head yet. We haven't. And it might not be soon either. And we have to be ready for that. And we can't become complacent in it. But do what you can. Again, not everybody can do everything. You don't have to do everything. Just do what you can. A little bit different than some of my other casts and a little bit more philosophical, I suppose, and high-minded. But I've been, trying to find my own place in this all, particularly as my health changes, as my body changes, and feelings of my own inadequacy in being able to help. But that said, thanks for coming to Finding Warmth for Our Sun here at Madison 365. I'm Matthew Browning, you're a host. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher, and Apple Podcasts. Mask up and stay safe and have yourselves a great week, folks.
This is 365 Media.